Should I bring my service dog in training to therapy? So, I recently posted a short that featured my two dogs sitting in their crates while I was waiting to go into my therapy appointment. One was Cool Whip, my 8-year-old seasoned service dog, and the other was John Denver, my, at the time, 3-month-old Labrador Retriever service dog in training. In that short, I asked you, the viewer, which dog you thought that I should bring into my therapy appointment with me, and most importantly, why I would make that decision. Well, I got a lot of responses, and to be honest, some of them surprised me. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a full video on not only who I brought, but why I brought them, because I think there's some important information that might be missing out there, and some stuff that I might not have known early on in my career or as a first-time owner trainer. So let's talk about it. So I want to start with a story, but before I do that, I do want to put a trigger warning here because I am going to be talking a little bit about my own experience with PTSD and medical trauma. So if today isn't the day to listen to that type of content, please go check out one of my other videos. Most of them are very lighthearted or training related and not like this style of video. So go check those out instead. It's really important to me that you take care of yourself. All right, let's do it. So I have a condition called hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and if you don't want to say that mouthful, it's HEDS. And that means that my joints are hypermobile and they can dislocate easily or fall out of place. I'm super bendy, my knees go backwards, the whole 9 yards. And so throughout my life, I've had issues where my knees basically dislocate for doing normal things. The first time that it happened, I was reading a book in bed. So it happens relatively frequently, and at the time I was working as a guide dog instructor and guide dog placement specialist, and I was at work cleaning out my van and my knee dislocated. And so I couldn't just go home and take my rescue meds for that situation, and I didn't have them with me, unfortunately. Because it happened at work, I had to go to the emergency walk-in clinic. Big shout out to my friend Spencer, who took me there that day, especially after I almost passed out and threw up from the pain. Very grateful for her driving me there. So I went over to the clinic, and when I got there, what I expected to happen is what's happened every time that I wasn't able to remedy the situation at home, which is I get these meds that I need for this particular situation. I wait an hour, hour and a half for the muscles around my knee to relax and stop being in so much pain, because basically my muscles are trying to hold my knee together and then I can't move it and whatever. That's really not important. What did happen instead is they told me that they couldn't give me the meds that I needed. And these are commonly available meds, but I'm guessing they didn't want to do the paperwork or whatever. And they said that they needed to do an x-ray. Now the problem was I couldn't straighten my leg to do the x-ray. So they leave me in a room, and like the x-ray room, tell me to put my leg on the table. I can't. I get yelled at for not putting my leg on the table, but I physically couldn't do it. And then the doctor comes in and they're like, we're going to straighten your leg for the x-ray. And I said, you can't do that. It's really incredibly painful. Please don't do that. We don't need the x-ray. I know what needs to happen. So I advocated for myself, and they did it anyway. And so basically what happened was I was on the table. 2 nurses were holding my shoulders and put a towel over my head while I screamed and begged him not to do it. The doctor forcibly straightened my leg. I had a panic attack because, consent. And it was just a horrifying experience. And so after that, I had significant issues with doctors touching my leg. And so then I filed a complaint. I went to a different doctor because I had to have follow-up care, which was also terrible. I brought Whip with me, but ultimately, I ended up having to bring my husband with me because I wasn't able, a dog cannot advocate. Dogs are great. She's fantastic. Great service dog. She cannot verbally advocate for me. And because I wasn't feeling safe being able to advocate for myself, because my advocating for myself did not work in that situation, I brought him with me to the next appointment. So why am I telling you this story? It's for 2 reasons. One is that I think visibility is important. Before this happened to me, I did not think it was a thing that could happen. And I think seeing other people who have experiences with trauma or PTSD is important. But it's also because I walked into that building thinking that I was going to, receive the medication that I knew that I needed. And I was going to sit in a chair for an hour and a half, and then I was going to go home. And that's not what happened. And sometimes therapy can be the exact same way. You walk in there thinking you're gonna be talking about some fight you had with your coworker, and you end up going a lot deeper into a more emotional and, deeper place that you weren't planning on going to. And that's sometimes how medical appointments are. You just don't always know what to expect. So thank you for hanging with me through that story. I know it's not what's typically on this channel, but I was hoping to make a point with it, and hopefully I accomplished that. I don't know. I guess you'll let me know in the comments. In any event, let's talk about which dog I brought to therapy, and more importantly, why. But before we do that, if you could head on down and boop that like button. If you could boop that like button, Cool Whip and I would be, Cool Whip sleeping. Oh my gosh. We'd be super grateful. I'd be super grateful if you just went down and hit that like button. All right, so as many of you guessed, I did bring my seasoned dog Cool Whip with me into therapy. Now, as someone in the industry who just lives and breathes service dog, I assumed that most people would choose Cool Whip. But a little less than half of you said that I should either bring in John Denver or bring in Cool Whip and John Denver. And I didn't do that, and I want to talk about why. Now, I realize that a lot of you didn't have all the information. You didn't know what my disability is, why I go to therapy. I think from hanging around this channel, you can guess that some of the need for a service dog is related to psychiatric tasks, and from the story above, panic attacks, PTSD, that kind of thing. Some of you also mentioned that my therapy might be like a 5-minute or even a 30-minute check-in. I've never had that experience in therapy, so I didn't even know that was a thing. But even if it was a short duration session, we still don't know where that therapy is going to go. You also might not know enough about John Denver. Now, there are definitely 3-month-old puppies that are able to chill for an hour, but John Denver is not one of them. But even if your 3-month-old puppy is able to chill for an hour, and this is the meat of what I want to talk about, we need to protect our young puppies from our high stress levels or emotional dysregulation as much as possible when they're still developing. And that's the really hard part about raising a psychiatric service dog. And it's the reason that I recommend that if possible, you work with a trainer, and that trainer does exposure trips for you to places that are highly difficult for you, or even accompanies you to those places as support, or even a friend that accompanies you for support, because we want to try really hard not to put our emotions and feelings about a situation on our young and growing puppy. And if you have the means to do it, even having a trainer train your puppy, keep your puppy from 8 weeks until at least 6 months or so, can be highly beneficial for that puppy. Because we need our young puppies to build confidence in a variety of situations. Many dogs take on the emotions of their handler, and even if you have a dog that doesn't tend towards that, which is ideal, we would like some amount of aloofness towards the handler's emotions for psychiatric service dogs, but even if they are that kind of dog, witnessing a panic attack or a major medical event at 3 months old could be really scary for any puppy. So we want to protect them as much as possible from these kinds of events. And if they do witness these types of events, we want to try to pair it with something positive so that we can kind of counteract some of that negative experience. This is the same reason that we don't ask puppies or adolescent dogs to do psychiatric tasks for us. They need to have time to develop and just be puppies before we ask them to help with our disability. So with that being said, therapy is actually one of the last places that I would bring my service dog in training. It's not the responsibility of my 3-month-old puppy to help me work through complicated emotions. It's my job to use other tools to cope with these things, whether it's my fully trained service dog or other coping or mitigation techniques. So then you might be asking, well, if I'm not going to bring him to my therapy appointments, how can I get him this type of medical exposure earlier on in his training? Great question. I would love to tell you. So I actually had an example of this happen last week. I needed to go to the doctor to get a few shots. Now, Sunny D is not ready for a full doctor's visit, even if it was a short one just to get shots. So I brought Cool Whip into the appointment, and we did the appointment part, and then I went and I put her back in the car, and I got John Denver dressed, I pottied him, and we went inside. And we just hung out in the waiting room of this really small, holistic doctor's office. He just hung out, watched people come in and out. I approached the desk and practiced having him lay at the, counter in front of the person up front there, whatever that person is, and he hung out for 5 minutes, and then we went back in the car. So I was able to give him a puppy-sized experience of a medical facility without ever having to take him to an appointment. And as he gets older, I can practice in more challenging places, like a larger doctor's office, or even the, main area of a hospital is a great place to practice. The key point here is that I can opt out at any time. I'm not going to get myself in a situation like a full-fledged appointment where I can't put my puppy's training first, especially if he's struggling. I can also do settling practice in lots of different areas. So the library is a great free place to go to have your dog settle in a quiet area. You can do so in a bookstore, you can go to a cafe, and eventually a restaurant. So eventually you'll be combining that long period settling with this exposure to medical facilities, and your dog will have had both of those experiences. All of these things need to be in Johnny D's repertoire before I bring him to therapy, which will probably be one of the last places that I bring him. His puppyhood deserves to be protected to the extent that I'm able to do that for him. And it's also really important that I'm able to function and have other coping strategies to be able to at least muddle through without my service dog, because sometimes your service dog will be sidelined for whatever reason. So in closing, thank you to all of you that contributed your comments to that short so that I had an opportunity to talk about this topic, and hopefully seeing how I would think through something like this was helpful. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, you're gonna wanna watch this one next, so you should probably click on it now. You all have an awesome day and happy training.